I often get asked, so what's the difference? You know, sometimes it's just describe the difference. You know what I mean, before and after, the nothing that didn't happen. And
yeah, listen, I mean, right now
although that in one sense is nonsensical, because of course nothing ever happened. But if what has become really obvious lately is that the only difference really is the absence of questions. I don't ask why. I don't ask how. And without how and why, this is fucking obvious. This doesn't need an explanation to be exactly as it is. Don't get me wrong, if there's attempted explanations and questions about, please give me an explanation and a reason and a purpose, then that's what's happening as well. And that's obvious. But life isn't asking questions. Life is unquestionably alive, and that's it. So unlike most things that you might listen to, this isn't a solution in any sense. All that wants to be said is that life is not asking. Life is not asking for your solution. You are. It's not asking for her solution or his. And what there is without all the questioning is a lot of space. It's very obvious that what I called my life was full of questions that needed answers. And they were, I mean, they weren't just any old questions. They were, a lot of the questions felt a matter of life and death. It's these existential questions. I mean, there are questions about paying the bills and making relationships work. And they could feel like life and death. But of course, then I got into, like most of us do at some point in life, get into asking existential questions. The meaning of life. So the wonder is, what if there is no meaning of life? Now, by that, I don't mean that life is meaningless. I mean, it's neither meaningful nor meaningless. I mean that meaning has no meaning. If meaning has no meaning, then meaningless. If meaning disappears or just doesn't appear, then meaninglessness doesn't appear. Because one of the things that is often leveled at this message communication, speaking about this, is that it's nihilistic, that it's really negative. It's not negative in any sense. It's utterly neutral. And it's neutrality. It's actually not negativity that self doesn't like. Self actually likes negativity. There's nothing more powerful for me to feel real about myself than to be utterly negative about my life. I don't doubt that you've all experienced that. Self loves that shit. Being down on myself. So whether I'm being positive or negative, they each have an energy that makes me feel real. That, in fact, negativity is more beneficial for self to feel real, because there's much more work to do on myself. There's more. The more problems I have, the more work there is for me to do. So in that sense, I feel more empowered. What I fear most, or what I can't even contemplate, is utter neutrality. That nothing is positive and nothing is negative until you make it so. Everything is simply as it is, including thoughts of this is good, or thoughts that this is bad, this should be happening, this shouldn't be happening. Well, there isn't anything that should happen or shouldn't happen. There is just what's happening, which includes thoughts of this shouldn't be happening. The death of good and evil is immensely liberating. In a most simple, obvious way. Really, it can be obvious that what you called evil was just what you disliked. What you called good and righteous was what you liked, what you preferred. So feel free to share anything, ask anything.
Philippe has his hand up.
Philippe.
Yes, good evening, Tim.
Hi.
Everybody. I don't know exactly how to put the question. My question is on the coexisting of working as a therapist and the seeing of this. And so I don't know if the disappearance of the me was there during the time you were a psychotherapist. how was your experience about therapy and seeing of emptiness? And yes, of course, my question is on this here. How is it possible to have glimpses of emptiness and continue to work as a therapist? So if you can share some words about it. It's just what's happening.
Yeah.
But if you can say something more.
I don't think you're going to like my answer.
I am here for that. Yeah.
My work, when I was working as a therapist, that was before I had any sense of emptiness, really, other than glimpses, I would say. I can't even say that I have a sense of emptiness now, because it isn't, because emptiness isn't a sense, really. It's it's impossible to speak about how can there be a knowing of emptiness when there's nothing to know, and yet it's undeniable. But no, when I worked as a therapist, there was no sense of that. My work as a therapist really was to try and help heal myself. It was part of my quest to become a to be a successful self, really. My work as a teacher had already fallen away. I had lost all motivation for that, and so I tried to heal myself, and I had this idea that being a therapist would help heal me. I didn't tell my clients, obviously I didn't tell my clients that. I had to keep that one pretty close to I didn't really tell my supervisor that either. I had to keep that to myself. But the thing is, so now, I mean, I do one-to-ones, which on the surface, superficially, you could say are no different to being a therapist. Two human beings sitting together for an hour and talking. So I still do that. But there is a massive difference between trying to heal another and heal myself as the motivation for speaking, rather than how it is now, which is just openly speaking about how it is. And rather, it's much more descriptive with no prescription on how things might be better. It's really just a discussion of how it actually is, how life is. So I don't have any problem about speaking with someone about how life is, but I do have a problem in how it might be better, what's wrong with it, and how it might be giving advice about how it might improve. Which you could say that's what therapy does.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you asking me, will you be able to continue as a therapist? Is that really what you're asking me?
Yeah, it's part of the question. I have more and more difficulty to continue. Yeah.
Yeah.
If I won't need money, I would stop. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have lost the center of the motivation to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's what I would. Yeah. That doesn't surprise me at all. But it's surprising. I mean, you can continue without the motivation, but it may come to a point where you can't.
Yeah. So sometimes in session, in one-to-one, this stuff arise, and this is very light sessions and very alive sessions.
Yeah.
But the suffering is to be if I can say, half alive and half death as a me. So yeah.
Yeah, I haven't got a recommendation,
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
but no, you won't be surprised if the motivation decreases. That wouldn't surprise me. Having said that, there's no reason that you have to stop at all.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying that it has to stop, in no way. But without the motivation, then it probably will.
Yeah.
It's very hard to be a therapist if you don't find fault with other human beings.
If you don't what?
Find fault in them, If you see every human being as perfectly being what it is, with all its faults, then the motivation to heal, the motivation to correct, to improve, is not likely to be there. That doesn't mean to say that it couldn't still happen, but it's not very likely without that motivation. The motivation comes from, oh yeah, I feel I'm wrong. I know what's faulty in me. I know what needs improving. I know what I have improved, and I can help others to do that. If that doesn't appear, if that sense of my own improvement, my own experience and my journey, without that being real, it's very unlikely that there's motivation to see the others as real, the other's story. You'll just see it as a story. And I mean, you could continue to work probably if you just saw it as storytelling. Maybe.
Yeah. I think hearing you, I think the principle, the center of my motivation was also to. It was a kind of healing for me. Of course,
Yeah.
and kind of increase my knowledge about emotions, about mind, thoughts, and so on.
Yeah.
And in the more subtle way to practice therapy is also perhaps a way to reflect what is already the case for people, that they are complete whole and that's it. Perhaps it's a subtle, more subtle way to be with somebody else, and in a so-called room or a therapy room. Yeah.
Well, maybe if that's the motivation, then I don't see why it couldn't continue. Really. If the motivation comes from that.
Faith has a hand up.
Thank you, Tim.
Oh, thanks, Philippe. And that was a very unsatisfactory answer. Hello, Faith.
Hello, Tim. Not really a question, just observations, really. For years, this search and being a seeker was sort of a huge part of the life, and it was tremendous fun and met great people, and it was a fool's paradise, and you were never going to get anywhere. All that has just fallen away. No particular reason, it's just not there anymore.
No.
But I'm here. Interesting.
You are?
Yeah. I've come to the meeting, but that huge drive that got me to Tony's every time he was in Hampstead has just all fallen away.
Yeah.
What do you mean, yeah? Last,
Well, yeah. I mean, it will all fall away. I mean, because if it's obvious there's nowhere to get to, then the motivation is likely to not be there.
not last week, but the week before, I think, and Darren was talking about a sadness. Is that right, Darren?
I don't remember.
Okay. And you expect us to listen to you and you don't listen to yourself.
I have no idea, no.
No. Anyway, because there is a sadness. I mean, I've lost all that great fun of the seeking.
Yeah.
I'm left with a sadness. And
Yeah.
we used to laugh at Tony's about, you know, abandon hope, all you who enter here.
Yeah.
We thought that was a huge joke. But the point is, I'm in a place, there is no hope.
No.
Because, you know, I always
No.
remember at school, The Power and the Glory by Graham Greene, this Catholic priest talking about the peasants, and all they had left was hope. But there's no hope.
No.
Discuss.
No, there is no hope.
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, I was there laughing along with you. I was there at Tony's laughing along until there is no hope. And then, of course, you could say then it's no laughing matter. You know, it's sort of the joke's on you because you were laughing at there being no hope until there actually, it's very clear and obvious that there is no hope. Because the reason there's no hope, very simply, is there's no future. So, you know, there really isn't tomorrow. Now, everyone can sort of rationalize that they've never found tomorrow, they've never seen tomorrow, and tomorrow never comes. You know, they're in common language, in common cliche, and yet everyone knows this, and yet it's where self lives. Self lives in tomorrow, you know, about my continuation. Well, without that sense of continuation, there is no hope, no. I will say though, I mean, there is no hopeless either. So the absence of hope doesn't feel hopeless. It does feel sad. And I mean, I often speak about this. There is a melancholy that comes with this. Now, that sounds awful. And yet life is always being lost. One of the most tragic things I think that self does is doesn't acknowledge that everything is always being lost. And I don't mean that metaphorically, I don't mean it spiritually, I just mean really. I mean, really, there really are no things. So the existence of things is illusory because everything just appears, and simultaneously, I know it's a time-bound word, but there is no space between the appearance of things and the disappearance of things. This appears and disappears. The idea of continuation, which is my life, if that goes, if that is not, and by the way, it doesn't go anywhere, it just never was. If it's seen to be illusory, it was just a story that I told myself, and I had it confirmed by everyone else. Everyone around me confirmed it was true. But if I can't believe it anymore, if that belief dies utterly, then of course it is a tragedy. It's really tragic for that self who believed it for a lifetime. So of course there's sadness. It's like it's a grieving for everyone. Because this doesn't alter the fact that 99.9% of all human beings never doubt their own existence as a self. Self is the very center of life. Everything revolves around me. I am the center. And if that goes, or it just doesn't appear, then there is a natural grieving and sadness.
Well, you
Yeah.
cheer me up no end, mate.
Yeah, I hope I've done my best to cheer. The thing about, but I mean, one of the most beautiful things is I no longer mind being sad. I am sad much more than I was as me. Because I'm not afraid of sadness. There's no fear of sadness. Sadness is beautiful. Sadness is love. Sadness is not to be feared at all. And yet I was so conditioned that sadness was wrong. And one of the motivations to speak about this is that it's so obvious now that the sadness that I was afraid of is just a very clear expression of human love, of being human. This isn't about not being human. There's, without me and my filter about what should be and shouldn't be human, you know, what I should and shouldn't be feeling, what I should and shouldn't be doing, the fullness of being human, which is all, by the way, there's no escape from being human. I mean, I'm not, when I'm speaking about this, I'm speaking about that being human is very, very obvious. But me being human is like a veil, is like a filter, is like being wrapped in, I don't know, I wrap myself in bubble wrap to keep myself safe, especially from sadness and lots of other feelings that I felt I shouldn't be having.
Thank you, Tim.
Oh, you're welcome. I mean, I'm not saying that without self there would certainly be more sadness. There's no rules. It's very obvious that each human being is utterly unique. But if the energy of self, of me, has been protecting the human being from feeling the obvious sadness, the loss of life, the loss of everything constantly, the sadness will, I'm guessing it just comes, and often you don't even know why you're sad, Faith, I'm guessing. There's just sadness. And I mean, there is sadness in losing the search, because like you said, always gave you something to do, didn't it? It was exciting. No, it did. It gave you purpose. And me, you know, what do I do? Well, I'm going to find enlightenment. I'm going to find awakening from the wise ones. And no matter what they said, even if they said, of course, you couldn't find it, and there was no one to find it, you never really believed them. I didn't. Because that would be the end of it. There and then, you'd never go again. And there is a sadness because it's a good social life as well, Faith. You know, it was, I'm hoping to go to Tony's in 2 weeks. So there can be just the enjoyment of meeting up with lovely people.
Yeah. But you've been on your travels, haven't you?
Yeah.
Been good.
I went to Asheville.
Wow. Good stuff, eh?
Oh, it was lovely, yeah. No, it's one of the motivations I have is to talk about sadness and say that sadness is beautiful.
It's not something Tony ever mentioned, if I remember.
No, he didn't talk about it much.
He was a good salesman.
Well, it's not a seller, is it? Well, it's not. You know, if you're advertising a car, you're not pointing out all the stone chips, are you?
Thank you for your pragmatism.
The thing about you could say life unfiltered. It's because everything just comes unbidden. Everything just appears. And I mean, if there's sadness here, very often I have no place to put it. I can't identify what I'm sad about.
Yes, that becomes clearer. Emotions just happen,
Yeah.
and then we find something to hang them onto.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Always,
a grotty neighbour, or yeah.
Always after the
Yeah.
emotion. Yeah.
We get the emotion first, and then we find the cause. Yeah.
And of course, that puts paid to being a CBT therapist, because CBT works on the presumption that emotions follow thoughts. You know, so you control.
Oh, right. Okay.
That's how cognitive behavior therapy
Right.
often works.
Right. But it's quite normal for the emotion to arise.
Well, the thing is there really a division between thought and emotion?
Too quick. Or too quick.
Yeah, it's artificial. We make an artificial. It's another artificial division that we make, that you can separate thoughts and emotions. It's like saying, you know, this whole duality between head and heart, between mind and body. It's rubbish. There is no knowing any separation between any, or there are no separate happenings. There is only what's happening. What's happening is the only thing that says there are separate things happening is thoughts that there are separate things happening. There aren't separate things happening. There's nothing separate from anything else until I say so. And then I could get others around me to confirm that I'm not mad, am I? That happened, and then that happened. And then, of course, I get others to agree that that happened because that happened. And then I feel really safe because I understand cause and effect. It's not true. But you will get most human beings to have some vague agreement, and then the self feels a little more comforted in its knowledge and understanding of how life works.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks, Faith.
John has his hand up.
Hi, John.
Hey, Tim. Hi. How you doing? Great
Oh,
to see you.
And you.
Yeah, I haven't seen you for a while live. I mean, I've obviously followed you on the other things.
Oh no, it's lovely to see you.
Yeah, a lot of things you said in the last 20 minutes have been really, really have touched me. But I was originally going to say, just in response to your conversation with Philippe, which I found really interesting, and I find it's a sort of conversation that I've heard in more than one non-duality session.
Yeah.
You know, psychiatrists saying to Tony, "Well, how the hell can I do my job?" And I wonder though that the thing is that when the therapist is in a position to offer help, which implies taking the person from A to a new B, which will be better than the old A.
Yeah.
Then it obviously suggests that they are in some position of authority to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And like it's what you were saying maybe about judgment, right? That they're in a position to stand back and judge where you're going wrong and what you need to do it right.
Yeah.
But I think I imagine that in a way that sometimes the real transformation. Yeah, transformation is a funny word to use in this context. The real okay, got to use transformation in inverted commas. Transformational effect.
Yeah.
of a therapeutic conversation can actually be that the therapist gets off any pedestal that anybody's putting on and simply accompanies you in recognizing what is.
Yeah.
And I think that in an amazing way that actually is probably the single most helpful thing that the person can do.
I agree, yeah.
I mean, because I'm not a psychiatrist. Okay, I'm a teacher. I teach literature, and I've found that my classes, in a university context, I'm meant to read a whole load of sort of heavy-duty critics and be able to sort of expound theories and shit like that. And as time goes by, I'm less and less interested in doing that at all, and I'm more and more interested in simply reading whatever the text in question is with the students and agreeing with them that I don't understand what the hell it's about either. Okay, but maybe there are bits that we can understand. So let's just talk about the bits that we can understand. But I in a way I feel that that's probably the best service I can do them.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, the other day a colleague of mine said, "John, I'd love to come to your classes," and I said, "No, you cannot come because I'm not doing at all what you would expect, a fully paid up, self-respecting university lecturer to be waffling on about." So I think,
well, number one, you're agreeing with the students, which of course that's almost sacrilege.
Yeah, I'm inviting them to be aware of their own sense of helplessness in front of the impossibility of understanding this incredibly sort of deep or profound text or whatever.
Yeah.
And also actually saying to them, "Look, guys, actually, I don't understand this either. So it really doesn't matter. Let's go and find something that we do understand, that we can enjoy talking about that."
Yeah.
So I find that the non-duality approach. Sorry, Tim. Let me just use the word approach. It's not an approach. But, what is really empowering about it is the way it totally removes authority.
Yeah.
There's no authority because there's no center, and if there's no, I mean, authority generally is found at the center of stuff, right? At the center of institutions and so on.
Yeah.
And if that's recognized as just being clouds and hot air, then there is a sort of freedom in that.
No, there is. I would say that is the liberation. Yeah.
But it's also, of course, it's the freedom to feel everything, including sadness and all this other stuff, which people might think they don't want to feel, but rather not feel.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
No, that's so true. Yeah. I couldn't agree with John more in terms of being a therapist. You don't have to be a therapist to be the best therapist. The best therapist is one who just listens and reflects and says, yeah, it's okay. That's how it is. Yeah, it's okay, but that's how it is. That probably is the best we've got for each other. When a human being is feeling that everything that they're feeling is wrong and it's not okay, for another human being just to sit and listen and go and hear it and say, yeah, I've heard it, it's okay. That's probably as good as we've got. Because the problem with solutions is all advice, all solutions only confirm that something's wrong and is at fault. Something needs correcting. I don't mean practical solutions. I mean emotional, really.
Dario has his hand up.
Hi, Tim.
Hi, Daria.
I always wanted to ask, when there's no self, there can be no bonding, can there?
When there's no self, there can be no what?
Bonding, like in a relationship.
Bonding. Oh yeah, bonding's very natural.
It still happens.
Yeah, it's another claim by me, isn't it? So without me, I'm the one who bonds. So without me, there would be no possibility of bonding. Well, there was never a me to bond. There is no me who bonds. There is naturally human bonding, of course. So I might suggest that the bonding might have a different flavor to it, a different energy to it, maybe. It won't feel so a matter of life and death. Because remember, the energy of bonding for me is that that person needs to be part of my completion strategy, in my completion plan, my goal of finding wholeness and not feeling quite so shit about myself, that they will help complete me. You know, they'll fill some of the gaps at least. But no, naturally bonding, human beings are social animals. You're a social animal. You just think you're a social animal. And it's your animal that you're in charge of how social and how bonding, and you choose who to bond with and all that bullshit. It's all lies. It's not lies in the sense of self is lying to itself. It's lies in the sense of it's simply not true, but me needs to have that sense of being in control. Otherwise, there would just be naturally bonding. You just say, self just says, I just say, I'm choosing who I bond with, and I am bound to them. There is actually no one being bonded. There is just naturally, you know, by bonding, I guess you mean attachment.
Yeah.
This isn't Buddhist in any way, this fucking message. I mean, what a wanker making attachment a problem. Fucking attachment is the best of life, isn't it? Being in love, for God's sake. You're saying that's the problem. Well, you couldn't get further off the mark than that. No, so just like everything else, self claims bonding attachment as mine, whereas actually is completely natural. So were you thinking, have you been waiting until
No. I was just wondering if kind of the sense of bondage, of just, I don't know.
Well, it depends what you mean by, did you say bondage, not bonding? Have I answered completely? Did you use the word bondage?
I might have used
that is a whole different question altogether. We're getting in a whole different ballpark there.
Yeah. Okay. No, I mean
Dario,
bonding and bondage is it not in the same ballpark?
Well, no, because it was never me who liked being tied up. There was just liking being tied up. That's not. It's the same as everything else. So self claims, you know, one of my special treats is to get the silk ties out. Well, it was never you doing it. There was just a love of silk ties and brass bedsteads. Maybe I've taken it a bit too far, but I think you get my meaning, in that just like everything, self claims natural human behavior as that's mine. So interestingly, bonding or bondage, the same applies.
I just don't know where to put your words in my library. Thank you.
Thanks, Dario. But that is one of the great myths, of course. I mean, in an absolute way, there are no relationships, because relationships require, you could say, selves. But of course, there are no selves. There never were. There aren't. It's not that there, you know, in some imagined future there will be a no self. There are none. There are just human beings in relationship who feel attached, who feel love, who feel companionship, who feel friendship, who feel all the best feelings of being human. And of course, with all the best feelings of being human come all the, what we'd call the worst feelings of being human. Because of course, all of those attachments, Buddha wasn't that ridiculous. They obviously all will end, do end. But I can't emphasize enough, I'm not speaking about the absence of any feelings at all. I'm only speaking about the absence of the one who has the feelings. And there is a sadness that they were never mine. None of it. I never had anything. But then that's the freedom, because I never had anything to lose. But of course, everything has to be lost in order for it to be clear that I had nothing to lose. Because while I have stuff, I'm hanging on to it. I'm holding on for dear life. It feels like life or death. And I'm quite happy, self is quite happy to hold on to all the stuff it really says it wants to get rid of. That's the most powerful. That's the stuff that makes self feel most real. All my failure, all my trauma, all my really bad experiences. Self holds those most dear. So there is quite a tragic loss in never being able to go to a therapist again and talk about your dreadful childhood and your awful parents and your dreadful siblings and how you've never been understood. All of that. You know, the loss of that, which isn't really spoken about much, that is that's immense loss to self. I mean, that's who I am. You hear, I mean, you turn on the news and you will hear somebody telling a story of how they came to be who they are today. And it's usually tragedy. You know, it's a tragic story that they're so proud of. Self has such great pride in comparing my tragic story with yours, and woe betide you if you outdo me. I shall have to make some shit up to just, because I need to be, you know, it isn't just our successes that self wants to brag about. You think you've had a bad day? Fucking hell, it might. That kind of thing. I mean, they're most, if you listen to most conversations, that's what they are. Or you get to a certain age and then it's, especially, I don't want to be sexist about it, but especially with women, it's then on to comparing children's successes. If you ever listen to two women's conversation. That reflected glory. Or tragedy. Self doesn't mind which. It's interesting now because I could listen to those much easier than I used to. I mean, I'm not really listening, but I can feign listening to those stories much easier than I used to because they're just stories, they don't mean anything. And there is, although it sort of sounds callous, I'm making it sound bad. It's not actually, there's more compassion in it not being, it's just a story. There can be real compassion because you know that human being is dreadful for them. And it's no good telling them it's not real, by the way. Don't go around doing that. That won't get you anywhere. Well, we've got a few minutes. I was just looking when I'm going to have a meeting. I'll have a meeting again next Thursday, another Zoom. The week after that, I'm going to a wedding, so there won't be one. The week after that, I'm flying to Copenhagen, so there won't be one. So there'll be a meeting next week, and then after that, the next one will be Thursday, the 11th of August. Sorry, I'm not, no. I'm not going to Copenhagen.
No, you are not flying to Copenhagen.
No, that's not until September. Sorry, we're flying Thursday, Thursday, 4th of August, going to Ireland. Now, I don't know. I don't think there's any of you from Ireland, but I am going to Ireland for the weekend. And I'm going to do a talk in County Laois in the middle of nowhere at my friend Siobhan's house. And if any of you fancy a trip to Ireland, then you're very welcome to come to that. And of course, you're very welcome to come to Copenhagen, which I've also got a meeting in Brighton on the 13th of August as well. And I haven't confirmed that I am definitely going to Asheville, but I think I'll confirm that now. So, but I'll give you, I'll confirm the dates and let you know when that is, and I'll put it on the website as soon as we've done that. So that's great. Yeah, if you've been thinking that you wouldn't mind a trip to Copenhagen, I would recommend it. It's really beautiful if you've never been. It's a beautiful city. Anyone from Asheville got a question? No.
Actually, I do have a question. Oh. Oh, I think I do. What? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
How do you, what, I'm imagining it's different each time, but how do you deal with?
Now, when I said I could hear you, it was sort of a lie. Because I can just, I can just about hear you, but only just. Say again.
How do you deal with when you do share this with someone, and of course they're in complete resistance or?
Now, I got the first part there. I got the how do I deal with, but then I didn't get the other bit.
Yeah, when you share this and someone wants to argue about it, what do you find yourself doing?
That's funny because nobody wants to argue with me. That doesn't happen, does it? I mean, I've been doing this nearly every week for 2.5 years. How many, and some of you have come to lots of these. How many times have I had people argue with me?
Once.
Yeah, maybe, yeah, once, probably in the whole time. It just doesn't happen. The thing is, this isn't a position, because this isn't a standpoint. There's nothing to defend in this at all. So it's quite hard to argue with me about this, because in order to have an argument, you have to have a position to defend, don't you? You have to have a standpoint. You have to have a center that you need to, this is the truth. Whereas this is saying there is no knowing the truth. And of course, there's nothing to argue about then. That doesn't mean to say people won't argue that there is a truth, but then that's fine. I mean, I wouldn't argue with them about that. I will say, I mean, this this can make life quite dull if you enjoy arguing, because it sort of kills the fascination with arguing about making a point, about, you know, being right, because there's no motivation to be right when there is no right. So I used to argue, and I must admit that is one of the losses, because I loved an argument, because I like to be right. And yeah, I find there's no arguing anymore. Only about practical things. I could argue if somebody said, you know, say there was only one bag of crisps left, and Alfie said, well, I've had one and you've had two, and I knew I'd only had one, then I would argue about that. So you'd argue about important things like food, but you won't be interested. I will say this kills all interest in existential arguments, philosophical arguments, spiritual arguments. It just is I mean, it's very destructive like that. There won't be any fascination with, because self has a fascination and a great pleasure in being right and finding the truth, of getting closer to the truth, you know. And when there is no truth to get closer to, I mean, that's the freedom that we're speaking of, that there is no closer or further away. You don't approach this, you don't get closer to it. There's no one who's nearer or further away. And that's what we might speak of it as unconditional love. No one's right. It's not that no one's wrong. You can still say people are wrong, but there won't be the passion for it that there was as me, because of course I want to be right. So there haven't been many arguments. Interestingly, when I used to go to Tony's, Tony would get a lot of people who would just turn up because they've heard of Tony Parsons, but they didn't really know what they were coming to at all. Well, that doesn't happen really here, and it hasn't happened at meetings. Tony used to get regularly quite a few people who would turn up. They were spiritual seekers, and they'd just turn up, and Tony would just you know, annihilate the whole seeking, and people would get really upset. I have to say, Tony wouldn't argue. He would just be really sarcastic and shut them down, but it really wasn't an argument. You're only going to get people arguing against this if they're already set in a place where they need to have their path, their position, their knowledge and understanding, be right. And that doesn't seem to happen here, Karen. But thanks for asking. You forced yourself to think of a question, and I could just about hear it. Well, lovely to see everyone. Thanks for coming. So I'll do another Zoom next Thursday. And if you're not on the mailing list, there's been a few problems with emails for some reason. Some people have said that they were getting emails and then they're not getting them. If you've not got an invitation to this meeting, and you were on the list, then please email me and I'll re-enter you on the list, so that you get an email invitation. But it's always on the website and it's always on Facebook. So thanks for coming, everybody, and hopefully see some of you next week.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you,
Tim.
Tim.
Thanks, Darren.
Cheers, Tim.
Appreciate it.
Cheers,
Bye-bye.
Darren.
Got the wrong time.